I'm still thinking about beauty, and I'm thinking about that quotation, which I think I've probably mentioned before in other videos, that comes out of evolutionary psychology and evolutionary aesthetics, which is that, let me see if I've got this right, beauty is the promise of function. Beauty is a promise of function. It's a great pithy aphorism, you know, it really captures a certain kind of truth. But what the idea of that is, that the feeling of beauty we have, so to say, so the theory goes, that feeling of beauty is generated from our atavistic roots in the Neolithic or something like that, or Jurassic, probably not Jurassic, Neolithic let's say. It was generated and formed in our systems, in the systems of humans in that period, as a way of kind of rewarding adaptive behaviour. You know, images come in through your eyes or through your nose or through your ears, and some of those images suggest behaviours or suggest the opportunities for behaviour which would be adaptively successful, you know, which would lead to greater reproductive success or greater survival possibilities. So looking out on a landscape, this isn't a particularly good example, but looking out a certain kind of landscape, some landscapes offer opportunities for survival better than others, obviously. This is probably a good example actually. Look, a fucking cornfield, man, you could live for years in this environment. There's a stream at the bottom over here. You know, these trees offer shelter plus building material. There's wildlife, there's rabbits all over the place around here. Opportunities for shelter, as I say, relatively mild climate. You know, looking out on here, if you were in the Neolithic and you were looking for somewhere to set up a shack or to build a shelter of some kind that you could probably stay for a few days and live, this is probably a good example, you know. So it's promising a kind of function, this environment, a function which is absolutely linked to our survival needs. And so the theory goes, the landscape's offering the promise of function, and we experience that as beauty. So I think, oh, this is a beautiful landscape. Even though those needs are gone, you know, the direct needs have gone in me. I wouldn't know how to survive in this landscape, quite honestly. I'd starve to death, surrounded by food. But even though those actual needs have gone, they remain as atavistic tendencies, atavistic feelings built into the human genome. So that's the idea. And similarly with things like beautiful people, you know. I mean, it's heteronormative, of course, but the idea is that you see a beautiful face, a beautiful woman, let's say, a beautiful body, and all of those attributes that we talk about beauty, beautiful. Things like, you know, beautiful lips, large hips, large breasts, certain kinds of shape, you know, that kind of thing, and the equivalents in men, the complements to that in men. You see that, and the things that the signifiers of beauty there are also promises of a certain kind of function, with that function being fecundity and fertility, childbearing hips, big lips that suggest you know, vaginal functioning, not to put too fine a point on it. So there's a lot of so that's the theory. That's the theory. Beauty is the promise of function. The feelings of beauty we get, atavistic throwback feelings to when, from a time when the functionality was associated with survival and reproduction. A couple of things about that, because obviously we're not in the Neolithic anymore, so even though we've got these things, other things have changed. Our environment's changed. We've got language, we've got different kind of consciousness, we've got culture, we've got education, we've got all kinds of different things that are built around that now. So I'm not sure if it can just simply say beauty is a promise of function and leave it there. I think we have to do other things. But before I talk about that, I'm just thinking about what this function is, because beauty is very specific, isn't it? You know, what do you do when you find something beautiful? Because it's not the same as something like lust or desire to possess. There's some overlap for sure, you know. But if you see a beautiful, let me personalise it. If I see a really beautiful woman, let's say, yeah, I probably would be turned on by that person, and would think, geez, I really want to fuck that woman's brains out. You know what I mean? That might go through my mind. I want to fuck her brains out. But beauty isn't just about fucking someone's brains out. That's a slightly different emotion, although I'm not convinced they can be separated. You know, alongside that sense of I want to use that object there in the function for which I see it to being designed, which is having its brains fucked out. Alongside that, there's also this care function, I think. I think beauty has care built into it. You know, the feeling of beauty that we have, the recognition of beauty, I think is also a recognition of a need to care. You know, because if like, let me just stay with other people for a minute. You know, if you are attracted to another human being, a member of the same sex or the opposite sex, and yeah, you might want to fuck their brains out. But if you really find them beautiful, you would probably also want to care for them. You know, you would probably want to hold them in a certain way, probably quite tenderly, to make sure you don't break them. I mean, you might, you know, do other things as well, but you probably want to care for them in a certain kind of way, make sure they're all right. Or a landscape. You know, if you've got an ounce of sensitivity in you and sensibility, yeah, you'd look out on a beautiful landscape across this field of corn and think, yeah, I really want to eat that corn, but it's beautiful. I also want to look after it. You know, I also want to protect it. I want to make sure it isn't ravaged. I want to make sure it isn't destroyed. You know what I mean? I've got caught up in the feeling of beauty is the feeling of care, I think. And even when we transfer it to things like possessions, you know, like a beautiful piece of furniture, or a beautiful carving, or you know, a beautiful vase or something like that, piece of ceramics. You know, yes, it's beautiful, and you want to possess it, you want to take it home, and you want to feast your eyes on it, and just like gorge your visual sense on it. But chances are you also probably want to care for it, you know. You want to, I don't know, maybe you run your hands lovingly over the vase and maybe move it really carefully and gingerly. And yeah, sure, it's about protecting your investment, but it's also about a kind of feeling of care that accompanies the desire to possess. You know what I mean? So whilst you might want to rape the landscape, you probably also want to look after it. Whilst you want to fuck someone's brains out, the chances are you'd want to be there with a catcher's mitt to catch those brains as they come out and put them on a silken cushion and stroke that brain and care for that brain after you've fucked it out. After you've took the Ming vase home from the auction rooms, rejoicing in your possession, you probably want to lay it carefully down, you know, and make sure nobody goes too close to it. So that's the first thing, beauty. Yeah, well, it might have this promise of function thing, but the function of beauty isn't the same as the other kinds of instrumental functions to do with the satisfaction of a particular desire. It's more complex than that, I think. Second thing about it is we're not in the Neolithic anymore, Toto. We're in whatever the year is, 2011. You know what I mean? And we've got different things that are going on. We've got this stuff I mentioned before about the brain and consciousness and language and culture, and that does different things, doesn't it? We've got the prefrontal cortex now. We've got a second chamber, an echo chamber for our lusts and desires. We've got all these lusts and desires copied to other parts of the brain so we can use them for different kinds of ways, you know. We use them as metaphors half the time, but you know, we can place them out there and look at them and open them up like tools. You know, we're not just driven by those desires. We have those desires and we can do things with them, albeit to a limited extent, but we can. You know, we can educate those desires. We can decide whether those desires are valid or not. We can say, yeah, my balls are telling me this is a beautiful thing, but actually, I don't need to do what my bollocks tell me. Or my eyes are telling me this is beautiful, but I don't need to follow my eyes. I can do other things. I can keep my eyes on the target, like boot camp training. Who is it said to boot camp? Focus your eyes on the target. Let the other things pass. Don't let the beautiful thing distract you, because it can be a distraction. You know what I mean? We can do that. We have some measure of control. Second chamber to consciousness. Yeah, we can develop it, I think, yeah. I'm just trying to think about Lenin, actually, because Lenin said that ethics is the aesthetics of the future. Ethics is the aesthetics of the future. I'll make a different video about that. I've already made one, I think, somewhere. I'll have a look for it. Anyway, there you go, look. Look at the functionality in that landscape. I could live in a landscape like that. If there was just a Tesco Express there, it would be fine. But there's not.